I absolutely love Monster Hunter Stories 2. Never in my dreams would I have expected it to be my favorite Monster Hunter game, but here we are. Despite that though, there are some things I'm not a fan of. So here are 10 things I would like to see changed or added in Stories 2, or at least in Stories 3 if that ever happens. At number 10, Wishlist System for crafting gear. This isn't the biggest deal since it's the lowest on the list, but a wishlist system for when you make weapons and armor as well as upgrades would be a necessary addition since it can be hard to remember what parts you need to make or upgrade something without having to write it all down. At number 9, monsters should have their specific theme songs. What makes a good chunk of monsters unique is that they have their own set of theme songs, and a lot of them are really good. In my opinion, it's a missed opportunity that almost all of the battle themes for certain monsters aren't present in Stories 2. At number 8, a lack of weapon variety. Now, I'm not talking about the fact that there's only 6 weapon types. I'm talking about some monsters not having enough of the 6 weapon types. For example, Astalos has a greatsword, gun lance, and hammer, but does not have a sword and shield, hunting horn, or bow. Meanwhile, Bolt Reaver literally has no weapon types outside of bow and hunting horn. And even Silverwind doesn't have a single weapon in the game. The fact that most of the weapons from each monster aren't even in the game is disappointing. So in future updates or in a Stories 3 of sorts, all monsties should have all their weapons if they have them in the main series. At number 7, more monsters as monsties. I was disappointed that Ignactor isn't a monstie in Stories 1, but the fact that Tetsukabra, Durambros, and even to some extent Plesioth aren't monsties is ridiculous. I'm sure many people were upset about Tetsukabra, especially since there's no legitimate reason it shouldn't be a monstie, which still leaves Zamtrios as the only obtainable amphibian in the game. If Stories 3 is ever a thing, I really hope these monsters become monsties. At number 6, setting multiple objectives for subquests. Even though Stories 1 didn't have the ability to set objectives for certain quests, it did allow you to set multiple objectives for monsters you hunt via subquest dens. But in Stories 2, you can't set more than one objective no matter which subquest it is, or how many subquests you have active. This can get annoying if you're like me and kill multiple birds with one stone, and complete multiple subquests at the same time. Setting more than one subquest isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it would be such a nice change. At number 5, running away from battles in co-op quests. One thing I really don't like is not being able to run from battles in co-op expeditions. This is especially the case when doing them solo, as most battles you accidentally run into, and your only option being to battle them out. It's even more frustrating when you're online with a random, and they run into a battle and they get stuck doing that battle unless you go back them up to make it go faster. So at the very least, I would like there to be something that allows both players to decide if they want to run from the battle. At number 4, the Elders Lair part break sections. I'm not sure I'm the only one who feels this way, but the Elders Lair was not as exciting for me as the Tower of Illusion or the Labyrinth of Ordeals in Stories 1, and that largely has to do with the part break sections. These sections of the game are pretty boring, especially in the special Elders Lair where monsters have more health, and thus making fights drag on. Even with Partbreaker XL, these objectives feel like a chore. So a good solution to this would be to replace the part break sections entirely with something more fun and engaging. At number 3, a second endgame area. In Stories 1, there was not one, but 2 endgame areas, the Tower of Illusion and the Labyrinth of Ordeals. Stories 2 has only one endgame area, but it's not the only thing you can do in the endgame. This is largely due to co-op expeditions, which would technically be considered the second endgame area, but it's not an area per se. So because of this, the Elders Lair would be considered the only single player endgame area. So I would like to see another endgame area that is like that of the Tower of Illusion, where it gets more difficult each floor and is not limited to certain gimmicks like breaking parts or beating monsters with a set amount of turns. At number 2, more monsties if the element changing mechanic is removed. One of the most unique mechanics in Stories 1 was the ability to change a monstie's element by giving it the necessary genes. But in Stories 2, you could do that before any updates, but it didn't last long since your monstie's original element would constantly overwrite the one you changed it to. In the next few updates, they removed the mechanic completely, which I really don't like since changing a monstie's element would allow for some creativity so your monsties can stand out from the rest. If this mechanic won't return, I would at least like more water and dragon element monsties since there's not enough of them. At number 1, a search filter when sorting monsties in the stables. So my biggest problem with Stories 2, aside from the removal of element change, is how limited the sorting system is in the stables. It may not be a big deal when you have very little amounts of monsties, but if you're in the endgame and you have hundreds of them you want to use for rite of channeling, it can be a pain to search page upon page for the genes you want. The only searching options you have are attack type, level, rarity, and acquired. So I would really like to sort my monsties based on genes, elements, and even species like in Stories 1.